having referred the tribunal to those documents showing that the military preparations were throughout the whole period in hand and nearing their completion, I would refer to one letter from the defendant Funk, showing that at the same time the economists had not been idle. It's a letter dated the 25th of August, in which Funk is writing to his Führer. He says, "My Führer, I thank you sincerely and heartily for your most friendly and kind wishes on the occasion of my birthday. How happy and how grateful to you we ought to be for being granted the favor of experiencing these overwhelmingly great and world-changing times and taking part in the mighty events of these days. The information given to me by Field Marshal Goering that you, my Führer, yesterday evening approved in principle the measures prepared by me for financing the war and for shaping the relationship between wages and prices and for carrying through emergency sacrifices made me deeply happy. I hereby report to you with all respect that I have succeeded by means of precautions taken during the last few months in making the Reichsbank internally so strong and externally so unassailable that even the most serious shocks in the international money and credit market cannot affect us in the least. In the meantime, I have quite inconspicuously changed into gold all the assets of the Reichsbank and of the whole of the German economy abroad, which it was possible to lay hands on. Under the proposals, I have prepared for a ruthless elimination of all consumption which is not of vital importance, and of all public expenditure and public works which are not of importance for the war effort. We will be in a position to cope with all demands on finance and economy without any serious shocks. I have considered it my duty as the General Plenipotentiary for Economy appointed by you to make this report and solemn promise to you, my Führer. Heil, my Führer, signed Walter Funk." That document is PS 699, and it goes in as GB 49. It's difficult, perhaps, in view of that letter, to see how the defendant Funk can say that he did not know of preparations and of the intention of the German government to wage war. I come now to the speech which Hitler made on the 22nd of August at Obersalzberg to his commanders-in-chief. By the end of the third week in August, preparations were complete. That speech has already been read to the tribunal. I would perhaps ask tribunal's patience if I quoted literally half a dozen lines so as to carry the story on in sequence. On the first page, PS 1014, which is already US 30, the fourth line, everybody shall have to make a point of it that we were determined from the beginning to fight the Western powers. The second paragraph, the destruction of Poland is in the foreground. The aim is the elimination of living forces, not the arrival at a certain line. Even if war should break out in the West, the destruction of Poland shall be the primary objective. And again, the famous sentence in the third paragraph, I shall give a propagandistic cause for starting the war. Never mind whether it be plausible or not, the victor shall not be asked later on whether we told the truth or not. In starting and making a war, not the right is what matters, but victory. We are going to see only too clearly how that propagandistic cause, which already had been put in hand, was brought to its climax. I turn to the next page, the third paragraph. It was clear to me that a conflict with Poland had to come sooner or later. I had already made this decision in the spring, but I thought that I would first turn against the West in a few years, and only afterwards against the East. I refer to these passages again particularly to emphasize the intention of the Nazi government not only to conquer Poland, but ultimately, in any event, to wage aggressive war against the Western democracies. I refer lastly to the last page, a passage which becomes more and more significant as we continue the story of the last few days. We need not be afraid of a blockade. I quote from about the fourth paragraph, short paragraph. The East will supply us with grain, cattle, coal, lead, and zinc. It is a big arm which demands great efforts. I am only afraid that at the last minute, some Schweinhund will make a proposal for mediation. The political arm is set further. A beginning has been made for the destruction of England's hegemony. The way is open for the soldier after I have made the political preparation. And again, a significant mention, the very last line comes significant later. Goering answers with thanks to the Führer and the assurance that the armed forces will do their duty. We pass from the military economic preparations and his exhortations to his generals to see how he was developing the position in the diplomatic and political field. On the 26th of August, 1939, I beg your pardon, on the 23rd of August 1939, the Danzig Senate passed a decree whereby Gauleiter Forster was appointed head of the state of the free city of Danzig, a position which did not exist under the statute setting up the constitution of the free city. I put in the next document, which is taken from the British Blue Book, only as evidence of that event, an event which was, of course, aimed at stirring up the feeling in the free city at that time. That is TC 72, number 62, which becomes GB 50. At the same time, frontier incidents were being manufactured by the Nazi government with the aid of the SS. The tribunal has already heard the evidence of General Lahausen the other day, in which he referred to the provision of Polish uniforms to the SS for these purposes, so that dead Poles could be found lying about on the German side of the frontier. I refer the tribunal now to 3 short reports which corroborate the evidence of that gentleman who came and gave evidence before you. And they are found in the British Blue Book. They are reports from the British ambassador in Warsaw. The first of them, TC 7253, which becomes GB 51, I beg your pardon, is dated the 26th of August. A series of incidents again occurred yesterday on the German frontier. Polish patrol met a party of Germans 1 kilometer from East Prussian frontier near Pelter. Germans opened fire. Polish patrol replied, killing leader, whose body is being returned. German bands also crossed Silesian frontier near a place that I'm afraid I'm quite incapable of pronouncing, twice near Rybnik and twice elsewhere, firing shots and attacking blockhouses and custom posts with machine guns and hand grenades. Poles have protested vigorously to Berlin. Gazeta Polska, an inspired leader today, says these are more than incidents. They are clearly prepared acts of aggression of a paramilitary disciplined detachments supplied with regular army's arms, and in one case it was a regular army detachment. Attacks more or less continuous. These incidents did not cause Poland to forsake calm and strong attitude of defense. Facts spoke for themselves, and acts of aggression came from German side. This was the best answer to the ravings of the German press. Ministry for Foreign Affairs, state uniformed German detachment has since shot Pole across frontier and wounded another. I pass to the next report, TC 72, number 54, which becomes GB 52. It's dated the same date, 26th of August. Ministry for Foreign Affairs categorically deny story recounted by Hitler to the French ambassador that 24 Germans were recently killed at Lodz and 8 at Bielsko. This story is without any foundation whatever. And lastly, TC 72, number 55, which becomes GB 53, a report of the next day, the 27th of August. So far as I can judge, German allegations of mass ill treatment of German minority by Polish authorities are gross exaggeration, if not complete falsification. March, let's say, since the date when the rest of Czechoslovakia was seized and they were ready to go against Poland, that has since March exacerbated feeling between the two nationalities. I suppose this has been done with the object A, creating war spirit in Germany, B, impressing public opinion abroad, and C, provoking either defeatism or apparent aggression in Poland. It has signally failed to achieve either of the two latter objects. It is noteworthy that Danzig was hardly mentioned by Herr Hitler. German treatment of Czech Jews and Polish minority is apparently negligible. Is apparently negligible factor compared with alleged sufferings of Germans in Poland, where, be it noted, they do not amount to more than 10% of the population in any commune. In face of these facts, it can hardly be doubted that if Herr Hitler decided on war, it is for the sole purpose of destroying Polish independence. I shall lose no opportunity of impressing on Minister for Foreign Affairs the necessity of doing everything possible to prove Hitler's allegations regarding German minority are false. And yet again, we have further corroboration of General Lahusen's evidence in a memoranda which has been captured of a conversation between the writer and Keitel. It's PS 795 and it becomes GB 54. Apparently a conversation with Keitel took place on the 17th of August, and the memorandum, I quote the first paragraph. I reported my conference with Jost to Keitel. He said that he would not pay any attention to this action, as the Führer had not informed him and had only let him know that we were to furnish Heydrich with Polish uniforms. He agrees that I instruct the General Staff. He says that he does not think much of actions of this kind. However, there is nothing else to be done if they have been ordered by the Führer, that he could not ask the Führer how he had planned the execution of this special action. In regard to Dachau, he has decided that this action would be executed only by the army. That then, my lord, was the position at the end of the first week in August. I beg your pardon, the third week in August. On the 22nd of August, the Russian-German non-aggression pact was signed in Moscow. And we have heard in Hitler's speech of that day to his commanders-in-chief how it had gone down as a shock to the rest of the world. In actual fact, the orders to invade Poland were given immediately after the signing of that treaty, and HR was actually to be in the early morning of the 25th of August. Orders were given to invade Poland in the early hours of the 25th of August. That I shall prove in a moment. On the same day, the 22nd of August, that the German-Russian agreement was signed in Moscow, news reached England that it was being signed, and of course the significance of it from a military point of view to Germany, particularly in the present circumstances, was obvious. And the British government immediately made their position clear in one last hope one last hope that if they did so, the German government might possibly think better. I refer to document TC 72 number 56, which is the first document in the next and last part of the tribunal's document book, in which the Prime Minister wrote to Hitler. That document becomes GB 55. Your Excellency will have already heard of certain measures taken by His Majesty's government and announced in the press and on the wireless this evening. These steps have, in the opinion of His Majesty's government, been rendered necessary by the military movements which have been reported from Germany, and by the fact that apparently the announcement of a German-Soviet agreement is taken in some quarters in Berlin to indicate that intervention by Great Britain on behalf of Poland is no longer a contingency that need be reckoned with. And no greater mistake could be made. Whatever may prove to be the nature of the German-Soviet agreement, it cannot alter Great Britain's obligation to Poland, which His Majesty's government have stated in public repeatedly and plainly, and which they are determined to fulfill. It has been alleged that if His Majesty's government had made their position more clear in 1914, the great catastrophe would have been avoided.
You're going a bit too fast.
I'll repeat that. It has been alleged that if His Majesty's government had made their position more clear in 1914, the great catastrophe would have been avoided. Whether or not there is any force in that allegation, His Majesty's government are resolved that on this occasion there shall be no such tragic misunderstanding. If the case should arise, they are resolved and prepared to employ without delay all the forces at their command, and it is impossible to foresee the end of hostilities once engaged. It would be a dangerous illusion to think that if war once starts, it will come to an early end, even if a success on any one of the several fronts on which it will be engaged should have been secured. Thereafter, the Prime Minister urges the German government to try and resolve the difficulty without recourse to the use of force, and they suggest for that purpose that a truce should be declared while discussions, direct discussions between the two governments, the Polish and German governments, immediately take place. Sir Neville Chamberlain concludes, at this moment I confess I can see no other way to avoid a catastrophe that will involve Europe in war. In view of the grave consequences to humanity which may follow from the action of their rulers, I trust that Your Excellency will weigh with the utmost deliberation the considerations which I have put before you. On the following day, the 23rd of August, Hitler replied to Sir Neville Chamberlain. The document is TC 72 number 60, which becomes GB 56. He starts off by saying that Germany has always wanted England's friendship. She's always done everything to get it. On the other hand, she has certain essential interests which it is impossible for Germany to renounce. I quote the third paragraph. Germany was prepared to settle the questions of Danzig and of the corridor by the method of negotiation on the basis of a proposal of truly unparalleled magnanimity. The allegations disseminated by England regarding a German mobilization against Poland, we see here the complete dishonesty of the whole business when we bear in mind the orders, the preparations to which I've referred, stretching back over the course of months and years. The allegations disseminated by England regarding a German mobilization against Poland, the assertion of aggressive designs towards Romania, Hungary, etc., as well as the so-called guarantee declarations which were subsequently given, had, however, dispelled Polish inclination to negotiate on a basis of this kind, which would have been tolerable for Germany also. The unconditional assurance given by England to Poland that she would render assistance to that country in all circumstances, regardless of the causes from which a conflict might spring, could only be interpreted in that country as an encouragement thenceforward to unloosen, under cover of such a charter, a wave of appalling terrorism against the 1.5 million German inhabitants living in Poland. Again, one cannot help remembering the reports of the British ambassador to which I've just referred. The atrocities which since then have been taking place in that country are terrible for the victims, but intolerable for a great power such as the German Reich, which is expected to remain a passive onlooker during these happenings. Poland has been guilty of numerous breaches of her obligations towards the free city of Danzig, has made demands in the character of ultimata, and has initiated a process of economic strangulation. He goes on to say that Germany won't tolerate such persecution, and the fact of the British guarantee of Poland makes no difference to his determination to end this state of affairs. I quote from paragraph 7, the German Reich government has received information to the effect that the British government has the intention to carry out measures of mobilization, which, according to the statements contained in your own letter, are clearly directed against Germany alone. This is said to be true of France as well. Since Germany has never had the intention, of taking military measures other than those of a defensive character against England and France, and as has already been emphasized, has never intended and does not in the future intend to attack England or France, it follows that this announcement, as confirmed by you, Mr. Prime Minister, in your own letter, can only refer to a contemplated act of menace directed against the Reich. Lord, when the tribunal rose for the adjournment, I had just read the letter from Monsieur de Ladier to Hitler of the 26th of August. On the 27th of August, Hitler replied to that letter, and I think it unnecessary to read the reply. The sense of it was very much the same as that which he wrote to the British Prime Minister in answer to the letter that he had received earlier in the week. Those two letters are taken from the German White Book, which I put in evidence as GB 58, so that perhaps the tribunal would treat both those letters as the same number. Nobody after that could say that the the German government could be in any doubt as to the position that was to be taken up by both the British and French governments in the event of a German aggression against Poland. But the pleas for peace did not end there. On the 24th of August, President Roosevelt wrote to both Hitler and to the President of the Polish Republic. I quote only the first few paragraphs of his letter. In the message which I sent to you on April the 14th, I stated that it appeared to be that the leaders of great nations had it in their power to liberate their peoples from the disaster that impended, but that unless the effort were immediately made, with goodwill on all sides, to find a peaceful and constructive solution to existing controversies, the crisis which the world was confronting must end in catastrophe. Today, that catastrophe appears to be very near at hand, indeed. I'm told that this morning I was reading rather quickly, so the tribunal will forgive me if I read a little slower. To the message which I sent you last April, yes, I think so. I have received no reply. But because my confident belief that the cause of world peace, which is the cause of humanity itself, rises above all other considerations, I am again addressing myself to you with the hope that the war which impends and the consequent disaster to all peoples may yet be averted. I therefore urge with all earnestness, and I am likewise urging the President of the Republic of Poland, that the governments of Germany and Poland agree by common accord to refrain from any positive act of hostility for a reasonable stipulated period, and that they agree likewise by common accord to solve the controversies which have arisen between them by one of the three following methods. First, by direct negotiation. Second, by the submission of these controversies to an impartial arbitration in which they can both have confidence. Or third, that they agree to the solution of these controversies through the procedure of conciliation. I think it's unnecessary to read any more of that letter. As I have already indicated to the tribunal, the answer to that was the order to his armed forces to invade Poland on the following morning. That document is Exhibit 72, number 124, which becomes GB 59. I put in evidence also the next document, TC 72 126, GB 60, which is the reply to that letter from the President of the Polish Republic, in which he accepts the offer to settle differences by any of the peaceful methods suggested. On the 25th of August, no reply having been received by the German government, President Roosevelt wrote again. I have this hour received from the President of Poland a reply to the message which I addressed to Your Excellency and to him last night. The text of the Polish reply is then set out. Your Excellency has repeatedly publicly stated that the aims and objects sought by the German Reich were just and reasonable. In his reply to my message, the President of Poland has made it plain that the Polish government is willing, upon the basis set forth in my message, to agree to solve the controversy which has arisen between the Republic of Poland and the German Reich by direct negotiation or the process of conciliation. Countless human lives can yet be saved, and hope may still be restored that the nations of the modern world may even now construct the foundation for a peaceful and happier relationship. If you and the government of the German Reich will agree to the pacific means of settlement accepted by the government of Poland, all the world prays that Germany too will accept. But, my Lord, Germany would not accept, and nor would they accept the appeals by the Pope, which appear in the next document. I'm sorry, the President of Poland's reply becomes GB 61. They would not agree to those proposals, nor would they pay heed to the Pope's appeal, which is TC 72, number 139, on the same date, the 24th of August, which becomes GB 62. But I don't think that it's necessary to read that. It's an appeal in similar terms, and there is yet a further appeal from the Pope on the 31st of August, TC 72, number 14, which becomes GB 63. The Pope is unwilling to abandon hope that pending negotiations may lead to a just and pacific solution, such as the whole world continues to pray for. I think it's unnecessary to read the remainder of that. If the Pope had realized that those negotiations to which he referred as the pending negotiations on the last days of August, which we are about to deal with now, were completely bogus negotiations, bogus insofar as Germany was concerned, and put forward as indeed they were, and as I hope to illustrate to the tribunal in a moment, simply as an endeavor to dissuade England, either by threat or by bribe, from meeting her obligations to Poland, then perhaps he would have saved himself the trouble in ever addressing that last appeal. It will be seen quite clearly that those final German offers to which I now turn were no offers in the accepted sense of the word at all. That there was never any intention behind them of entering into discussions, negotiation, arbitration, or any other form of peaceful settlement with Poland. They were just an attempt to make it rather easier to seize and conquer Poland than appeared likely if England and France observed the obligations that they had undertaken. Perhaps I might, before dealing with the documents, summarize in a word those last negotiations. On the 22nd of August, as we have seen, the German-Soviet pact was signed. On the 25th of August, or rather on the 24th of August, orders were given to his armies to march the following morning. After those army orders had been given, news apparently reached the German government that the British and Polish governments had actually signed a formal pact of non-aggression and of mutual assistance. Up till that time, it will be remembered that the position was the Prime Minister had made a statement in the House and a joint communique had been issued, I think on the 6th of April, that they would in fact assist one another if either were attacked. But no formal agreement had been signed. Now, on the 24th of August, after his orders had been given to invade, news came that such a formal document had been signed, and the invasion was postponed for the sole purpose of making one last effort to keep England and France out of the war. Not to end the war, not to cancel the war, but to keep them out. And to do that, on the 25th of August, having postponed the invasion, Hitler issued a verbal communique to Sir Neville Henderson, which, as the tribunal will see, was a mixture of bribe and threat, with which he hoped to persuade England to keep out. On the 28th of August, Sir Neville Henderson handed the British government's reply to that communique to Hitler. That reply stressed that the differences ought to be settled by agreement. The British government put forward the view that Danzig should be guaranteed, and indeed that any agreement came to should be guaranteed by other powers, which of course in any event would have been quite unacceptable to the German Reich. But as I say, one really need not consider what would have been acceptable and not acceptable, because once it had been made clear, as indeed it was in that British government's reply of the 28th of August, that England were not to be put off assisting Poland in the event of Germany's aggression. The German government really had no concern with further negotiation, but were concerned only to afford themselves some kind of justification and to prevent themselves appearing too blatantly to turn down all the appeals to reason that were being put forward. On the 29th of August, in the evening at 7:15 p.m., Hitler handed to Sir Neville Henderson the German government's answer to the British government's reply of the 28th. And here again, in this document, it is quite clear that there was no, in fact, the whole object of it was to put forward something which was quite unacceptable. He agrees to enter into direct conversations as suggested by the British government, but his demands and those conversations must be based upon the return of Danzig to the Reich and also of the whole of the corridor. It will be remembered that hitherto, even when he alleged that Poland had renounced the 1934 agreement, even then he had only put forward as his demands the return of Danzig alone and the arrangement for an extraterritorial autobahn and railroad running through the corridor to East Prussia. That was unacceptable then. To make quite certain, he now demands the whole of the corridor. No question of an autobahn or railway. The whole thing must become German. Even so, even to make doubly certain that the offer would not be accepted, he says, on those terms, I am prepared to enter into discussion, but to do so, as the matter is urgent, I expect a plenipotentiary with full powers from the Polish government to be here in Berlin by midnight tomorrow night, the 30th of August. This offer was made at 7:15 p.m. on the evening of the 29th. That offer had to be transmitted first to London and from London to Warsaw. And from Warsaw, the Polish government had to give authority to their ambassador in Berlin, so that the timing made it quite impossible, if indeed it were possible, to get authority to their ambassador in Berlin by midnight the following night. It allowed them no kind of opportunity for discussing the matters at all. As Sir Neville Henderson described it, the offer amounted to an ultimatum. At midnight on the 30th of August, at the time by which the Polish plenipotentiary was expected to arrive, Sir Neville Henderson saw Ribbentrop. And I shall read to you the account of that interview in which Sir Neville Henderson handed a further message to Ribbentrop in reply to the message that had been handed to him the previous evening. And at which Ribbentrop read out in German a 2 or 3 page document which purported to be the German proposal to be discussed at the discussions between them and the Polish government. He read it out quickly in German. He refused to hand a copy of it to the British ambassador. He passed no copy of it at all to the Polish ambassador, so that there was no kind of possible chance of the Poles ever having before them the proposals which Germany was so graciously and magnanimously offering to discuss. On the following day, the 31st of August, Mr. Lipski saw Ribbentrop and could get no further than to be asked whether he came with full powers. When he said he did not come with full powers, Ribbentrop said that he would put the position before the Fuhrer. But in actual fact, it was much too late to put any position to the Fuhrer by that time, because on the 31st of August, I'm afraid I'm unable to give you the exact time, but on the 31st of August, Hitler had already issued his directive number 1 for the conduct of the war, in which he laid down HR as being quarter to 5 the following morning, the 1st of September. And on the evening of the 31st of August, at 9 o'clock, the German radio published, broadcast, the proposals which Ribbentrop had read out to Sir Neville Henderson the night before, saying that these were the proposals which had been made for discussions, but that as no Polish plenipotentiary had arrived to discuss them, the German government assumed that they were turned down. That broadcast at 9 o'clock on the evening of the 31st of August was the first that the Poles had ever heard of the proposals, and they were the first, in fact, that the British government or its representative in Berlin knew about them, other than what had been heard when Ribbentrop had read them out and refused to give a written copy on the evening of the 29th. After that broadcast, at 9:15, perhaps when the broadcast was in its course, a copy of those proposals was handed to Sir Neville Henderson for the first time. Having thus just summarized, for the convenience, I hope, of the tribunal, the timing of events during that last week, I would ask the tribunal to refer briefly to the remaining documents in their document book. I first put in evidence an extract from the interrogation of the defendant Goering, which was taken on the 29th of August, 1945. That's all right. There you are.
Als Verteidiger des Angeklagten Göring widerspreche ich der Verwertung der soeben angekündigten Urkunde, die einen Protokollauszug aus einer Aussage des Göring darstellt. Er ist hier an Gerichtsstelle erschienen und es besteht also die Möglichkeit in jeder Zeit, dass...
Will you repeat that?
Er ist hier an Gerichtsstelle erschienen Und es besteht also die Möglichkeit, ihn jederzeit als Zeugen hier zu hören.
Go on. I haven't heard what you
Ich bin
said.
fertig. Als Verteidiger des Angeklagten Göring widerspreche ich der Vorlage der Urkunde, die einen Protokollauszug aus einer Zeugenvernehmung des Zeugen Göring darstellt. Der Angeklagte Göring ist hier an der Gerichtsstelle und kann jederzeit als Zeuge gehört werden über das Thema, das hier in dieser Urkunde niedergelegt ist.
Is that your objection?
Jawohl.
the tribunal does not understand the ground of your objection in view of Article 15C and Article 16B and C of the Charter. Article 15C provides that the chief prosecutors shall undertake, among others, the duty of the preliminary examination of all necessary witnesses and of the defendants. And Article 16 provides that in order to ensure fair trial for the defendants, the following procedure shall be followed. B. During any preliminary examination of a defendant, he shall have the right to give any explanation relevant to the charges made against him. C. A preliminary examination of a defendant shall be conducted in or translated into a language which the defendant understands. Those provisions of the Charter, in the opinion of the tribunal, show that the defendants may be interrogated and that their interrogations may be put in evidence.
Ich bin nur davon ausgegangen, dass, wenn es die Möglichkeit besteht, über eine Beweisfrage einen Anwesenden als Zeugen zu verhören, diesem Verhör als Zeugen der Vorzug zu geben ist, weil es das stärkere Beweismittel ist.
You will certainly have the opportunity of summoning the defendant for whom you appear to give evidence himself. But that has nothing to do with the admissibility of his interrogation, his preliminary examination.
Lord, this extract is TC 90, which I put in as GB 64. I quote from the middle of the first answer. It's at the end of the 6th, 7th line.
Just one moment.
TC 90, my lord.
Did it come before TC 72?
Follows it.
Follows it.
Yes, it does. Well, it comes before some of the TC 72.
Yes, go on.
It's immediately after the Pope's appeal, which was
Go on.
the defendant Goering says there, on the day when England gave her official guarantee to Poland, the Führer called me on the telephone and told me that he had stopped the planned invasion of Poland. I asked him then whether this was just temporary or for good. He said, no, I will have to see whether we can eliminate a British intervention. I go back to the question. When the negotiations of the Polish foreign minister in London brought about the Anglo-Polish treaty at the end of March or the beginning of April, was it not fairly obvious that a peaceful solution was impossible? Answer. Yes, it seemed impossible after my convictions. I think that must be a bad translation, according to my convictions.
Yes.
But not according to the convictions of the Führer. When it was mentioned to the Führer that England had given her guarantee to Poland, he said that England was also guaranteeing Romania. But then when the Russians took Bessarabia, nothing happened, and this made a big impression on him. I made a mistake here. At this time, Poland only had the promise of a guarantee. The guarantee itself was only given shortly before the beginning of the war. On the day when England gave her official guarantee to Poland, the Führer called me on the telephone and told me that he had stopped the planned invasion of Poland. I asked him then whether this was just temporary or for good. He said, "No, I will have to see whether we can eliminate British intervention." So then I asked him, "Do you think that it will be any different within 4 or 5 days?" At this time, I don't know whether you know about that, Colonel. I was in connection with Lord Halifax by a special courier outside the regular diplomatic channels to do everything to stop war with England. After the guarantee, I held an English declaration of war inevitable. I already told him in the spring of 1939, after occupying Czechoslovakia, I told him that from now on, if he tried to solve the Polish question, he would have to count on the enmity of England. 1939, that is after the Protectorate. Question: is it not a fact that preparations for the campaign against Poland were originally supposed to have been completed by the end of August 1939? Yes. And that the final issuance of the order for the campaign against Poland came sometime between the 15th and 20th of August 1939, after the signing of the treaty with Soviet Russia. The dates obviously are wrong there. Answer: yes, that is true. Question: is it not also a fact that the start of the campaign was ordered for the 25th of August, but on the 24th of August, in the afternoon, it was postponed until September the 1st in order to await the results of new diplomatic maneuvers with the English ambassador? Answer: yes. My only comment upon that document is in respect of the center paragraph, where Goering is purporting not to want war with England. The court will remember how it was Goering, after the famous speech on the 22nd of August to his commanders-in-chief, got up and thanked the Führer for his exhortation and assured him that the armed forces would play their part. I omit the next document in the document book, which carries the matter no further. And we go on to Hitler's verbal communique, as it's called in the British Blue Book, that he handed to Sir Neville Henderson on the 25th of August, after he had heard of the signing of the Anglo-Polish agreement, and in an endeavor to keep England from meeting her obligation. He states in the first paragraph how, after hearing the British ambassador, he is anxious to make one more effort to save war. In the second paragraph, he asserts again that Poland's provocations were unbearable. And I quote paragraph 2, Germany was in all circumstances determined to abolish these Macedonian conditions on her eastern frontier. And what is more, to do so in the interests of quiet and order, but also in the interests of European peace. The problem of Danzig and the corridor must be solved. The British Prime Minister had made a speech which was not in the least calculated to induce any change in the German attitude. At the most, the result of this speech could be a bloody and incalculable war between Germany and Poland.
And England.
I beg your pardon, and England. Such a war would be bloodier than that of 1914 to 1918. In contrast to the last war, Germany would no longer have to fight on two fronts. One sees the threat, the veiled threat appearing in this paragraph. Agreement with Russia was unconditional and signified a change in foreign policy of the Reich which would last a very long time. Russia and Germany would never again take up arms against each other. Apart from this, the agreements reached with Russia would also render Germany secure economically for the longest possible period of war. The Führer had always wanted Anglo-German understanding. A war between England and Germany could at best bring some profit to Germany, but none at all to England. And then we come to the bribe. The Führer declared that the German-Polish problem must be solved and will be solved. He is, however, prepared and determined after the solution of this problem to approach England once more with a large, comprehensive offer. He is a man of great decision, and in this case also he will be capable of being great in his action. And then magnanimously, he accepts the British Empire and is ready to pledge himself personally for its continued existence and to place the power of the German Reich at its disposal on condition that his colonial demands, which are limited, should be negotiated by peaceful means. His obligations to Italy remain untouched. Again, he stresses his irrevocable determination never to enter into war with Russia. I quote the last two paragraphs. If the British government would consider these ideas a blessing for Germany...
Oughtn't you read the first two lines of paragraph 3?
Yes, I did summarize it. No? Paragraph 3, he also desires to stress the irrevocable determination of Germany never again to enter into conflict with Russia.
Yes.
I turn to the last two paragraphs. If the British government would consider these ideas a blessing for Germany and also for the British Empire, a peace might result. If it rejects these ideas, there will be war. In no case will Great Britain emerge stronger. The last war proved this. The Führer repeats that he is a man of ad infinitum decisions, by which he is bound, and that is his last offer. I had just finished reading the offer from Hitler to the British government, which was TC 72 number 68 and becomes GB 65. The British government were not, of course, aware of the real object that lay behind that message, and taking it as its face value, an offer to enter into discussions, they wrote back on the 28th of August saying that they were prepared to enter into discussions. They agreed with Hitler that the differences must be settled, and I quote from paragraph 4, "In the opinion of His Majesty's government, a reasonable solution of the differences between Germany and Poland could and should be effected by agreement between the two countries on lines which would include the safeguarding of Poland's essential interests." And they recall that in his speech of the 28th of April, the German Chancellor recognized the importance of these interests to Poland. But as was stated by the Prime Minister in his letter to the German Chancellor on the 22nd of August, His Majesty's government consider it essential for the success of the discussions which would precede the agreement that it should be understood beforehand that any settlement arrived at would be guaranteed by other powers. His Majesty's government would be ready, if desired, to make their contribution to the effective operation of such a guarantee. I go to the last paragraph on that page, paragraph 6. His Majesty's government have said enough to make their own attitude plain in the particular matters at issue between Germany and Poland. They trust that the German Chancellor will not think that because His Majesty's government are scrupulous concerning their obligations to Poland, they are not anxious to use all their influence to assist the achievement of a solution which may command itself both to Germany and to Poland. That, of course, knocked the German hopes on the head. They had failed by their threats and their bribes to dissuade England from observing her obligations to Poland, and it was now only a matter of getting out of their embarrassment as quickly as possible and saving their face as much as possible. I put in that last document becomes GB 66. And I put in also Sir Neville Henderson's account of that interview. The next document, TC number 75, which becomes GB 67. It's number 75, I'm putting in. During that interview, the only importance of it is that Sir Neville Henderson again emphasized the British attitude and that they were determined in any event to meet their obligations to Poland. One paragraph I would quote, which is interesting in view of the letters that were to follow. Paragraph 10. In the end, I asked him two straight questions. Was he willing to negotiate direct with the Poles, and was he ready to discuss the question of an exchange of populations? He replied in the affirmative as regards the latter, though I have no doubt that he was thinking at the same time of a rectification of frontiers. As regards the first, he said he could not give me an answer until after he had given the reply of His Majesty's government the careful consideration which such a document deserved. In this connection, he turned to Ribbentrop and said, "We must summon Field Marshal Goering to discuss it with him." And then in the next paragraph again, Sir Neville Henderson finally repeated to him very solemnly the main note of the whole conversation so far as he was concerned. I pass to the next document, which is a TC 72, number 78, which becomes GB 68. The German reply, as I outlined before, was handed to Sir Neville Henderson at 7:15 p.m. on the 29th of August. The reply sets out the suggestions submitted by the British government in their previous note, and it goes on to say that the German government are prepared to enter into discussions on the basis that the whole of the corridor, as well as Danzig, are returned to the Reich. I quote particularly the last but one paragraph on the first page of that document. The demands of the German government are in conformity with the revision of Versailles Treaty in regard to this territory, which has always been recognized as being necessary. That is to say, the return of Danzig and the corridor to Germany, the safeguarding of the existence of the German national group in the territories remaining to Poland. It's only just now, as I emphasized before, that right has been recognized for so long. On the 28th of April, his demands consisted only of Danzig, an autobahn, and a railway. This, the tribunal will remember, is the letter in which he's trying to get out of it now, trying to manufacture justification, putting forward proposals which under no possible circumstances could either Poland or Great Britain accept. But as I said before, he wanted to make doubly certain. I go to the second page halfway down the page, starting on this subject. That is to say, perhaps I'd better start to make sense in the paragraph before, the third paragraph. The British government attach importance to two considerations. One, that the existing danger of an imminent explosion should be eliminated as quickly as possible by direct negotiation, and two, that the existence of the Polish state in the form in which it would then continue to exist should be adequately safeguarded in the economic and political sphere by means of international guarantees. On this subject, the German government makes the following declaration. Though skeptical as to the prospects of a successful outcome, they are nevertheless prepared to accept the English proposal and to enter into direct discussions. They do so, as has already been emphasized, solely as the result of the impression made upon them by the written statement received from the British government that they too desire a pact of friendship in accordance with the general lines indicated to the British ambassador. And then to the last but one paragraph. For the rest, in making these proposals, the German government have never had any intention of touching Poland's vital interests or questioning the existence of an independent Polish state. These letters really sound like the letters of some fraudulent swindler rather than from a government of a great nation. The German government, accordingly, in these circumstances, agreed to accept the British government's offer of their good services, their good offices, in securing the dispatch to Berlin of a Polish emissary with full powers. They count on the arrival of this emissary on Wednesday, the 30th of August, 1939. The German government will immediately draw up proposals for a solution acceptable to themselves and will, if possible, place these at the disposal of the British government before the arrival of the Polish negotiator. That was at 7:15 in the evening of the 29th of August. And as I've explained, it allowed little time in order to get the Polish emissary there by midnight the following night. That document, that document was GB 68. The next document, Neville Henderson's account of the interview, summarizes what had taken place. And I quote particularly paragraph 4. I remarked that this phrase, that is to say, the passage about the emissary being there by midnight the following night, I remarked that this phrase sounded like an ultimatum. But after some heated remarks, both Herr Hitler and Herr Ribbentrop assured me that it was only intended to stress the urgency of the moment when the two fully mobilized armies were standing face to face. That was the interview on the evening of the 29th of August. That last document becomes GB 69. Again, the British government replied, and Sir Neville Henderson handed this reply to Ribbentrop at the famous meeting on the midnight of 30th of August, the time by which the Polish emissary had been expected. I need not read it at length. The British government reciprocate the desire for improved relations. They stress again that they cannot sacrifice the interests of other friends to that in order to obtain an improvement in the situation. They understand, they say, that the German government accepts the condition that the settlement should be subject to international guarantee. They make a reservation as to the demands that the Germans put forward in their last letter, and they are informing the Polish government immediately. Lastly, they understand that the German government are drawing up the proposals. That document, the account of the interview, at midnight on the 30th of August will be GB 70. I beg your pardon. That is the actual document that Sir Neville Henderson handed to Ribbentrop at that interview. For the account of the interview, we go to the next document in the tribunal's book, TC 72, number 92, which becomes GB 71. It's not a very long document, but it is perhaps worth reading in full. I told Herr Ribbentrop this evening that His Majesty's government found it difficult to advise the Polish government to accept the procedure adumbrated in the German reply, and suggested that he should adopt the normal contact, that is, that when German proposals were ready, to invite the Polish ambassador to call and hand him the proposals for transmission to his government, with a view to the immediate opening of negotiations. I added that if basis afforded prospect of settlement, His Majesty's government could be counted upon to do their best in Warsaw to temporize negotiations. Ribbentrop's reply was to produce a lengthy document which he read out in German aloud at top speed. Imagining that he would eventually hand it to me, I did not attempt to follow too closely the 16 or more articles which it contained. Though I cannot therefore guarantee the accuracy, the main points were, and I need not read out at length the main points. I go to paragraph 3. When I asked Ribbentrop for the text of these proposals, in accordance with the undertaking in the German reply of yesterday, he asserted that it was now too late, as the Polish representative had not arrived in Berlin by midnight. I observed that to treat the matter in this way meant that the request for the Polish representative to arrive in Berlin on the 30th of August constituted, in fact, an ultimatum, in spite of what he and Herr Hitler had assured me yesterday. This he denied, saying that the idea of an ultimatum was a figment of my imagination. Why then, I asked, could he not adopt the normal procedure and give me a copy of the proposals and ask the Polish ambassador to call on him, just as Hitler had summoned me a few days ago, and hand them to him for communication to the Polish government? In the most violent terms, Ribbentrop said that he would never ask the ambassador to visit him. He hinted that if the Polish ambassador asked him for an interview, it might be different. He said that I would naturally inform my government. I said that I would naturally inform my government so at once. Whereupon he said, while those were his personal views, he would bring all that I had said to Hitler's notice. It was for the Chancellor to decide. We parted on that note, but I must tell you that Herr von Ribbentrop's whole demeanor during an unpleasant interview was aping Hitler at his worst. He inveighed incidentally against Polish mobilization, but I retorted that it was hardly surprising, since Germany had also mobilized, as Herr Hitler himself had admitted to me yesterday. Sir Neville Henderson didn't know at that time that Germany had also once already given the orders actually to attack Poland, some days before. The following day, the 31st of August, at 6:30 in the evening, Lipski, the Polish ambassador, had an interview with Ribbentrop. This document, the next document, TC 74, number 112, becomes GB 72. Short account. I carried out my instructions. This is a report to Mr. Beck. I carried out my instructions Ribbentrop asked me if I had special plenipotentiary powers to undertake negotiations. I said no. He then asked whether I had been informed that on London's suggestion, the German government had expressed their readiness to negotiate. Directly, a delegate of the Polish government, furnished with the requisite full powers, who was to have arrived on the preceding day, 30th of August. I replied that I had no direct information on the subject. In conclusion, Ribbentrop repeated that he had thought I would be empowered to negotiate. He would communicate my démarche to the Chancellor. I'm sorry, I gave you GB.
Oh, that doesn't matter.
The number was all right. Lord, as I indicated, already it was too late. The orders had already been given on that day to the German army to invade. I turned to C-126. It's already in as GB 45. Other portions of it were put in. And I refer now to the letter on the second page, or the order, most secret order, it's signed by Hitler and is described as his directive number 1 for the conduct of the war. Dated the 31st of August, 1939. Paragraph 1. Now that all the political possibilities of disposing by peaceful means of a situation on the eastern frontier which is intolerable for Germany are exhausted, I have determined on a solution by force. The attack on Poland is to be carried out in accordance with the preparations made for full Weiss, with the alterations which result where the army is concerned from the fact that it has in the meantime almost completed its dispositions. Allotment of tasks and the operational target remain unchanged. The date of attack, 1st September 1939. Time of attack, 0445 hours. That is inserted in red pencil. This time also applies to the operation at Gdynia, Bay of Danzig, and the Dachau Bridge. 3. In the West, it is important that the responsibility for the opening of hostilities should rest unequivocally with England and France. At first, purely local action should be taken against insignificant frontier violation. Or thereafter it sets out details of the order, which for the purpose of this court it is unnecessary to read. That evening at 9 o'clock, the German radio broadcast the terms of the German proposals about which they were so willing to enter into discussions with the Polish government. It sets out the proposals at length. It will be remembered that by this time neither Sir Neville Henderson nor the Polish government nor their ambassador had yet been given a written copy of them. And it is indeed a document which is tempting to read, or to read extracts of it, simply as an exhibition or an example of pure hypocrisy. I refer to the second paragraph. Further, the German government pointed out that they felt able to make the basic points regarding the offer of an understanding available to the British government by the time the Polish negotiator arrived in Berlin. We've heard of the manner in which they did that. They then say, instead of a statement regarding the arrival of an authorized Polish personage, the first answer the government of the Reich received to their readiness for an understanding was the news of the Polish mobilization. And only towards 12 o'clock on the night of the 30th of August 1939 did they receive a somewhat general assurance of British readiness to help towards the commencement of negotiations. Although the fact that the Polish negotiator expected by the government of the Reich did not arrive, removed the necessary conditions for informing His Majesty's government of the views of the German government as regards a possible basis for negotiation, since His Majesty's government themselves had pleaded for direct negotiations between Germany and Poland, the German Minister for Foreign Affairs, Ribbentrop, gave the British ambassador on the occasion of the presentation of the last British note precise information as to the text of the German proposals which would be regarded as a basis of negotiation in the event of the arrival of the Polish plenipotentiary. And thereafter, they go on to set out the story, or rather their version of the story of the negotiations over the last few days. I pass to not the next document in the tribunal's book, but to the document after it, TC 54, which becomes GB 73. On the 1st of September, when his armies were already crossing the frontier and the whole of the frontier, he issued this proclamation to his armed forces. The Polish government, unwilling to establish good neighborly relations as aimed at by me, wants to force the issue by way of arms. The Germans in Poland are being persecuted with bloody terror and driven from their homes. Several acts of frontier violation, which cannot be tolerated by a great power, show that Poland is no longer prepared to respect the Reich's frontiers. To put an end to these mad acts, I can see no other way but from now onwards to meet force with force. The German armed forces will, with firm determination, take up the struggle for the honor and the vital rights of the German people. I expect every soldier to be conscious of the high tradition of the eternal German soldiery qualities and to do his duty to the last. Remember always and in any circumstances that you are the representatives of National Socialist Greater Germany. Long live our people and the Reich. And so we see that at last Hitler had kept his word to his generals. He had afforded them the propagandistic justification. And at that time, anyway, it didn't matter what people said about it afterwards. The view shall not be asked later on whether we told the truth or not. Might is what counts, or victory is what counts, and not right. That day, the 1st of September, when news came of this violation of Polish ground, the British government, in accordance with their treaty obligations, sent an ultimatum to the German government in which they stated that unless the German, I quote from the last paragraph, I am accordingly to inform your Excellency that unless the German government are prepared to give His Majesty's government satisfactory assurances that the German government have suspended all aggressive action against Poland and are prepared promptly to withdraw their forces from Polish territory, His Majesty's government in the United Kingdom will without hesitation fulfill their obligations to Poland. By the 3rd of September, no withdrawal had taken place, and so at 9 o'clock, that document the document I've just referred to will be GB 74. At 9 o'clock on the 3rd of September, a final ultimatum was handed to the German Minister for Foreign Affairs. I quote from the 3rd paragraph. Although this communication was made more than 24 hours ago, no reply has been received. But German attacks upon Poland have been continued and intensified. I have accordingly the honor to inform you that unless not later than 11 o'clock British summer time today, the 3rd of September, satisfactory assurances to the above effect have been given by the German government and have reached His Majesty's government in London, a state of war will exist between the two countries as from that hour. And so it was that at 11 o'clock on the 3rd of September, a state of war existed between Germany and England and between Germany and France. All appeals to peace, appeals to reason, we now see completely stillborn when they were made. Plans, preparations, intention, determination to carry out this assault upon Poland have been going on for months, for years before. And it mattered not what anybody but the German government had in mind, or whatever rights anybody else but the German nation thought they had. And if there is any doubt left at all after what we have seen, I would ask you to look at two more documents. If you would look at the last document, first of all, in your document book, PS 1831, which becomes GB 75. Even now, on the 3rd of September, Mussolini offers some chance of a peace. We have here a telegram. It is timed 6:30 hours, and I'm afraid I'm unable to say whether that is 6:30 in the morning or the evening, but it is dated the 3rd of September. And I quote, "The Italian ambassador handed to the State Secretary at the Duce's order the following copy for the Führer and Reich Chancellor and for the Reich Minister for Foreign Affairs. Italy sends the information, leaving, of course, every decision to the Führer, that it still has a chance to call a conference with France, England, and Poland on the following basis. I'll start again. The Italian ambassador handed to the State Secretary at the Duce's order the following copy for the Führer and Reich Chancellor and for the Reich Minister for Foreign Affairs. Italy sends the information, leaving, of course, every decision to the Führer, that it still has a chance to call a conference with France, England, and Poland on the following basis. 1, an armistice which would leave the army corps where they are at present. And it will be remembered that on the 3rd of September, they had advanced a considerable way over the frontier. 2, calling the conference within 2 or 3 days. 3, solution of the Polish-German controversy would be certainly favorable to Germany as matters stand today. This idea, which originated from the Duce, has its foremost exponent in France. Danzig is already German, and Germany is holding already securities which guarantee most of her demands. Besides, Germany has had already its moral satisfaction. If it would accept the plan for a conference, it will achieve all her aims and at the same time prevent a war which already today has the aspect of being universal and of extremely long duration. But, my lord, perhaps even Mussolini did not appreciate what all Germany's aims were. And, of course, the offer was turned down in the illuminating letter which Hitler was to write in reply. I refer you back to the document before that. That will be GB 76. I beg your pardon, it's still part of the same exhibit, GB 75. Duce, I first want to thank you for your last attempt at mediation.
As I understand it, the GB references you give are not on the documents at all. They are the exhibit numbers.
Yes.
Which are to be put upon the documents after they've been put in.
That is correct. They're put upon it by the clerk of court.
Will you try and make clear the references which are on the documents, as it will help the tribunal to find the document itself?
This is the last document was PS 1831, and it's the very last in the document book. That's the one I've just referred to, the telegram from Mussolini. The document to which I am about to refer is the one but last in the tribunal's book, but it has the same number on it as the last because it forms part of the same exhibit.
I think if you just explain the system in which the exhibits are numbered, it would help some members of the tribunal.
The exhibits are numbered at the present moment before they are put in evidence with a variety of serial numbers, such as TC, PS, L, and other letters. There's no significance attached to that at all. Depends on who they've been found by and what files they have come from. When the documents are put in as exhibits, they are marked by the court with a court number. The documents put in by the United States representatives were all prefixed with the letters US. The documents which have been put in by the British prosecutors have all been prefixed with the letters GB. If it is if it would be of any assistance to members of the tribunal, I will have their document books marked up this evening with the new court numbers that have been put upon them by the court officials during the course of the day. If your Lordship, please. If there is difficulty, if there is any document missing from any of those books, I have a copy. Yes, the thank you. That is GB75. Duce, I first want to thank you for your last attempt at a mediation. I would have been ready to accept, but only under condition that there would be a possibility to give me certain guarantees that the conference would be successful. Because for the last 2 days, the German troops are engaged in an extraordinarily rapid advance in Poland. It would have been impossible to devaluate the bloody sacrifices made thereby by diplomatic intrigues. Nevertheless, I believe that a way could have been found if England would not have been determined to wage war under all circumstances. I have not given in to the English because, Duce, I do not believe that peace could have been maintained for more than half a year or a year. Under these circumstances, I thought that, in spite of everything, the present moment was better for resistance. At present, the superiority of the German armed forces in Poland is so overwhelming in all fields that the Polish army will collapse in a very short time. I doubt whether this fast success could be achieved in 1 or 2 years. England and France would have armed their allies to such an extent that the crushing technical superiority of the German armed forces could not have become so apparent anymore. I am aware, Duce, that the fight which I enter is one for life and death. My own fate does not play any role in it at all. But I am also aware that one cannot avoid such a struggle permanently, and that one has to choose, after cold deliberation, the moment for resistance in such a way that the probability of success is guaranteed. And I believe in this success, Duce, with the firmness of a rock. Recently, you have given me the kind assurance that you think you will be able to help me in a few fields. I acknowledge this in advance with sincere thanks. But I believe also, even if we march now over different roads, that fate will finally join us. If the National Socialistic Germany were destroyed by the Western democracies, the fascist Italy would also have to face a grave future. I was personally always aware of this community of the future of our two governments, and I know that you, Duce, think the same way. To the situation in Poland, I know that I would like to make the brief remark that we lay aside, of course, all unimportant things, that we do not waste any man on unimportant tasks, but direct all on acts in the light of great operational considerations. The northern Polish army, which is the corridor, has already been completely encircled by our action. It will be either wiped out or will surrender. Otherwise, all operations proceed according to plan. The daily achievements of the troops are far beyond all expectations. The superiority of our Air Force is complete, although scarcely 1/3 of it is in Poland. In the West, I will be on the defensive. France can here sacrifice its blood first. Then the moment will come when we can confront the enemy also there with the full power of the nation. Accept my thanks, Duce, for all your assistance which you have given to me in the past, and I ask you not to deny to me in the future. My Lord, that completes the evidence which I propose to offer upon this part of the case in respect of the war of aggression against Poland, England, and France